colleagues do on this panel, it's Donald Trump, baby.
Yep.
It's all about Donald Trump, right? The old pivot. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Somalia and not going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with this massive fraud scandal. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. With my remaining seconds, can we play the video I have, Mr. Chairman?
The second Republicans brought up fraud, the left tried to scream racism instead of answering the questions. But then Eli Crane did something that changed the whole room. He rolled the tape, and suddenly the excuses started falling apart fast. Watch this.
Comes after weeks of viral videos from a young man YouTuber who was literally creeping around daycares by himself, making claims about fraud that were not there. And then the vice president and the FBI director were retweeting these videos without even verifying if they were true. So we're not accusing people of being xenophobic and racist. They are being xenophobic and racist, including the President of the United States. And I want to say, for one, that I stand with the Somali and the immigrant community standing here today.
Mr. Hudson, are you just hearing from Republicans on this, or are Democrat constituents like, oh my God, I'm struggling to put my kids in school, struggling to make ends meet, and my tax dollars are being robbed by people, and then they're sending it all over the place, and this is complete fraud. What is going on, and why hasn't anything been done about it?
I'll give you a personal example. So my family, my in-laws in particular, are politically diverse. A lot of them vote for Democrats, and they're fairly apolitical. They're not like me, all plugged in. And so I kind of use them as a bellwether for what the people are thinking. Across the board, everybody is upset about this fraud.
And I'm guessing when you guys bring this up, whether it's to the Waltz administration, whether it's to the AG, the number one thing that comes back at you is you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, or you're an Islamophobe. As we've seen Governor Waltz now trying to answer for these questions, he's doing it at the national level. Do you guys hear the same thing at the state level as well?
Yes, absolutely. They always pivot to the divisive. As I stated in my opening statement, it's diversion, right? We're going to talk about personalities. We're going to talk about partisan politics. We're going to find some way to get people yelling at each other rather than looking at the problem.
Or, like you've heard my colleagues do on this panel, it's Donald Trump, baby.
Yep.
It's all about Donald Trump, right? The old pivot. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Somalia and not going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with this massive fraud scandal. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. With my remaining seconds, can we play the video I have, Mr. Chairman?
horta aad iyo aad aan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta safaari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskooley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliya marka waxaan fursad u helnay in aan sharci soo gudbino oo la dhahayo Meals Act oo u fududeynayo in waqtigaanay pandemic aan ku jirno oo dhalinyarada iskoolka aynan joogin oo guryahooda ay joogaan aynan gaajoonin oo familkoodi wili ay fursad u helaan in cunto ay helaan oo meelo qaarkood laga qaybinayo ay cuntada ka soo qaadan karaan marka aadaan ugu mahad celinaya safari in ay tahay meelaha city oo diyaarinayo cunto maalin kasto dhalinyarada ciyaalkii iyo familkoodina ku taakuleynayo cuntada city maalintii kaliya safari waxay cunto siisaa 2300 oo ciyaal ah iyo familkooda taas waa mid muhiim ah sida aad u ogtihiin dhalinyaro badan gaajo ku nool wadankaanayti ama familkooda fursad u helin in quraac qada iyo casho ay siiso marka in qadadaasaytii ay meel ka helaan aaday u muhiimsan tahay bishaan ramadaanka oo familiyaalkeena badan iyagoo aan shaqo haysanin iyagoo aan taakulayn kale helaynin in aynan ka walwalin ciyaalkooda yaryar sidii ay qada ku siin lahaayeen waa muhiim marka waxaan u mahad celinayaa safaariyo kaleete iyo dadka badan oo maalin ilaahay keeno fursad u qaata in ay u volunteer gareeyaan oo ay taakuleeyaan familiyaalka.
One thing that is so alarming is the reporting that many of these fraudulent companies are then donating the stolen money back to the same Democrats that are protecting them and advocate for these very programs. Is that correct, Mr. Hudson?
I would agree with that statement.
Well, we just had one of my Democrat colleagues said these are just opinions. Do you know, are these guys donating money back to Democrats?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from Breitbart News saying, with the title being Database Searches Show Somali Fraudsters Funding Democrat Politicians. So these aren't opinions.
Without objection.
There's actually reporting on this. Are you guys aware? You guys are elected officials in Minnesota, right? Are you guys aware of the reporting that some of the stolen money is getting funneled back to the Islamic terror group Al-Shabaab in Somalia? Mr. Robbins.
Yes, sir. And we have evidence of it going back as far as 2012, where a man was convicted of sending $21,000 to Al-Shabaab. In 2011, 2 Minnesota women were convicted of sending money to different groups.
If there is a single thing the left absolutely refuses to tolerate right now, it is everyday citizens demanding to know where their tax revenue goes. That is exactly what made this particular congressional interaction so incredibly eye-opening. Representative Eli Crane was doing far more than arguing legislation in this moment, as he actively uncovered a repetitive cycle that countless citizens are growing completely exhausted of witnessing. Whenever widespread financial deceit, political rot, or bureaucratic misuse is highlighted, the reaction from liberal politicians remains entirely predictable. They immediately shift focus, throw out distractions, hurl accusations of bigotry, yell about intolerance, and ultimately attempt to silence the entire dialogue before anyone can pose legitimate inquiries. That is precisely what unfolded during this hearing. The session was originally designed to investigate enormous theft accusations connected to Midwestern initiatives and worries regarding vanishing public funds, while blue-collar families desperately fight to cover utilities, afford food, and educate their children. However, rather than confronting those serious issues head-on, the discussion was instantly derailed and steered toward the former president, simply because countless left-leaning politicians use his name as an ultimate distraction tactic. The congressman highlighted this absurdity flawlessly when he sarcastically noted that the answer to everything is always Donald Trump. That specific remark resonated so deeply because every single person viewing the broadcast recognizes its absolute validity. Citizens are witnessing soaring prices devastate households, observing controversies multiply, seeing federal agencies bleed cash relentlessly, and receiving condescending speeches regarding prejudice and the previous administration instead of actual solutions. Then arrived the specific pivotal exchange that truly carried the most weight. The representative broadcasted a video featuring Ilhan Omar, which instantly elevated the entire proceeding far beyond a simple legislative disagreement. This strategy worked because conservatives are attempting to demonstrate that the issue extends beyond solitary theft incidents into a toxic legislative environment where condemning disastrous strategies is immediately branded as hateful rhetoric to avoid difficult interrogations. This remains their primary playbook, aiming to muzzle dissent, bully individuals into submission, and poison the discourse so thoroughly that everyday folks completely abandon their pursuit of the truth. Yet a massive hurdle now exists for these liberal lawmakers, as ordinary voters completely refuse to fall for this deception any longer. A highly crucial segment of this proceeding occurred when the testifier clarified that even centrist or reliably liberal relatives were absolutely enraged by the massive embezzlement accusations. This detail is essential because left-wing politicians continuously operate under the false narrative that anxieties surrounding federal rot exclusively originate from right-wing voters. That assumption is undeniably false in today's political climate. Citizens across all demographics are collectively demanding answers to the exact same question regarding the destination of their stolen wealth. Individuals labor tirelessly, surrender portions of their income, fight to simply exist in this financial disaster, and subsequently discover that massive fortunes vanished into fake charities, while lawmakers bicker over superficial social issues on the news. Citizens are naturally furious, yet the progressive establishment's reaction continuously escalates the underlying tension. Rather than offering clarity, they brand their detractors as bigots, and rather than launching inquiries, they question intent while substituting real consequences with emotional manipulation and racial division. Congressman Crane and his conservative colleagues are capitalizing entirely on this massive public resentment because they recognize the electorate is utterly drained by the endless political misdirection. Another highly alarming revelation was the accusation that certain suspects linked to this criminal enterprise were actively funneling cash directly into liberal campaign coffers. This detail is completely volatile because once the public suspects their hard-earned dollars are being embezzled and subsequently laundered into campaign machines, faith in the system absolutely crumbles. This specific danger explains why the representative highlighted the independent journalism and formally submitted the findings into the Congressional archives. He intended to firmly establish that these claims were far more than baseless theories tossed around during an intense legislative debate. His objective was to guarantee the audience understood that legitimate journalists and formal probes are actively scrutinizing these shady financial networks. Liberal leaders will inevitably claim conservatives are weaponizing this scandal for electoral gain, which is a predictable excuse that only functions if the public assumes the underlying theft is fabricated, yet a growing number of citizens fully believe the corruption is real. The aspect that made this specific showdown so effective for the political right is how flawlessly it channeled a much larger national sentiment. A massive portion of the populace believes a dual justice framework exists today, featuring one tier where regular folks are destroyed by regulations, levies, and soaring costs, alongside a second tier where elite insiders remain shielded regardless of their illicit actions. This bitterness is expanding rapidly, creating incredibly hazardous electoral terrain for left-wing candidates approaching upcoming races because citizens prioritize basic capability and genuinely demand a functional bureaucracy. If the conservative wing manages to successfully paint liberals as guardians of deceit, who muzzle dissent using smears of bigotry, it transforms into an absolutely lethal campaign narrative. The progressive establishment continuously gambles that the public will overlook financial agony and bureaucratic disasters provided the former president is referenced frequently, yet proceedings like this prove that particular tactic is rapidly losing its effectiveness. Representative Crane comprehended his precise objective during this specific legislative exchange. He completely abandoned any desire to appease mainstream journalists, choosing instead to address the everyday citizens who feel neglected, marginalized, and mocked whenever they dare to ask how their earnings are being spent. Frankly, as liberal politicians continue refusing to address these financial inquiries head-on, an increasing number of voters will inevitably conclude that conservative leaders are entirely correct in their suspicions. If you appreciated this detailed analysis, please ensure you smash the like button, subscribe to the page, and leave your opinions in the discussion section below. Do you genuinely believe the public is finally growing exhausted with the endless political misdirection and pathetic justifications? So please share your thoughts down below.